drastically more curly than the others, it will usually draw a much higher price in the collector's world. Oddly enough, since the vast majority of them sound and play wonderful, most collectors are overly concerned about the look of the wood as to being the most beautiful example they can get. I've been asked many times, have you run into old Les Pauls that were just seemed to be dogs or duds, not good Les Pauls, not good guitars? I say it's very rare. I'm not talking about guitars that have been abused or had a bad life. I'm talking about guitars in good shape that for some reason just didn't have it. They didn't feel right. That is exceptionally rare. It's definitely the exception to the rule. I've owned over 60 of these Sunburst Les Pauls. I've handled hundreds, and I can't honestly say I've ever played one that was just a total dud, no good at all. I found some I didn't like. I found some I liked better than others, but virtually every one of them is a great guitar. The next big change they did was in 1959, they changed the fret wire size from a very thin wire to a very thick wire. What they would have called a jumbo fret. By today's standards, it's a little bit less than jumbo from what the common man thinks of, but it's a larger fret. Most of us find that larger fret more desirable and more comfortable. There are examples of a few late 58s that have this, and examples of a few early 59s with the narrow frets. Even sometimes the features did not go exactly in chronological order. But this feature changed the way the guitar feels if it still has the original frets, and changed the way that it plays to many players. And I know many of my friends who play these guitars desire the thicker frets. I do, so do most players. Now, frets are a part of the guitar that definitely wears out. At some point, if it's played enough, they will wear out. Like tires on your car, they have to be replaced. It is not a sin. It does not devalue the guitar in itself to have a guitar refretted, as long as the fretwork done is perfect. If the fretwork is not perfect, well, that devalues any guitar, no matter what it is. So, as long as we're working with perfect frets, we're fine. Refret your guitar if necessary. If parts break, repair them or replace them. One of the more unusual changes that we don't quite understand was the change in the colors of the bobbins inside the pickups. As you can see on this guitar, it has cream bobbins on the bridge pickup and a black and cream bobbin on the neck pickup. Originally they were black, but originally they had a metal cover on it and you would never see that feature. Someone in the 60s got the bright idea of taking the covers off. They perceived that this made the guitar sound better. It does arguably change the sound, but the sound, in my opinion, the sound change is so minute that I don't see any good reason to remove that cover. And it does add protection to the pickup and a certain amount of shielding. So I don't recommend taking them off. However, once they're off and I have a guitar that works fine, I don't worry about it, I leave them off. When players started taking these off, they discovered that some of these guitars had cream coils, cream bobbins instead of black ones. And something about the cream look captured the love of the player or the collector, and they've decided that these are more valuable, more desirable, strictly because of color. The ones that are black on one bobbin and cream on another are called zebras. The ones that are double cream, the more common term is double white, even though the color is actually cream and not white. It's just the way we use the terminology. So they do not sound any better, but some people think they do, and sometimes if you think something sounds better, who's to say you're wrong? It's an opinion. This feature lasted up into 1960 with a few rare exceptions after that. In 1960, Gibson started making a few more changes. They started considering to change the red paint or pigment, dye, whatever the term is, I forget. They started to change the red they used so that it would not fade from ultraviolet light. This was becoming a big problem for them with their dealers, where the guitar would fade before they sold it. By changing this pigment to a new pigment, it was also a different shade. It was slightly lighter red. They experimented with this, and we have to assume that the serial numbers are roughly in chronological order. There are examples of this color change before a group that came later that didn't have the color change. But this new color was a less desirable in perfect cherry sunburst than the old ones, because it was a softer red and did not look as striking to many people. Sometimes they didn't do as good a job of painting the paint on there, and it has grown to be called a clown burst, when the colors look almost orange to yellow with no real beautiful change from the red to yellow. It's almost stark with an orangish, reddish, pinkish color to the yellow center. Shortly after that idea of change, they changed the shape of the neck. Now, this is a misconception that a lot of people have. I would guess that about half of the 1960s have what they call the thinner neck. And when we talk about the thin neck on a 1960, it's not the width of the neck at the nut. It's the depth of the neck that got thin. There's much less wood behind it. It stays the same width. It's narrower this way. However, this was a feature that changed on Gibson guitars virtually across the board at that time. Almost any Gibson in late 1960 will have the same neck shape. That was not a Les Paul feature, that was a Gibson feature that changed the shaping of their necks. Now, in these days, their necks were still largely hand-shaped. And they can vary drastically from very thick to very thin just because of the way the man made the neck. How much sanding he did, how much wood he took off of it. The idea that any particular year has thick necks and other years don't is not true. They can show up in any year, and thin necks can show up in any year. This takes us pretty much through the progression of the Les Paul from 1952 through 1960. At the end of 1960, with these guitars not selling very well at all, Gibson decided to radically change the body style of their solid body electric line to the guitar we know as the SG. When they first brought it out, they still had an endorsement with Les Paul, so his name came onto those guitars. As they started to hit the market in 1961, they were still called Les Pauls. They are not built anything like these guitars, and they don't work like these guitars because they are built completely different. I think that's as much as I can tell you about the change of good old 50s Les Pauls through these years, the Les Paul Standard. If anyone has any questions, if you'd like to come up and ask me some questions, take a closer look at these guitars, you're welcome to. I do have a booth here at the show. The name of my booth is TW59. I'm on aisle 500. Most of the way to this end. If you'd like to come by, I have one more, and my neighbor has two, and I'd be happy to talk to you, answer any questions I can. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.